On this vote, the yeas are 50, the nays are 50. 3/5 of the senators duly chosen and sworn not having voted in the affirmative. The motion is not agreed to.
Madam President.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Madam President, I want to be clear about what just happened on the Senate floor. Every single Senate Republican just voted against starting debate on legislation to protect Americans' voting rights. Once again, the Senate Republican minority has launched a partisan blockade of a pressing issue here in the United States Senate, an issue no less fundamental than the right to vote. I've laid out the facts for weeks. Republican state legislatures across the country are engaged in the most sweeping voter suppression in 80 years, capitalizing on and catalyzed by Donald Trump's big lie. These state governments are making it harder for younger, poorer, urban, and non-white Americans to vote.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. I'm Jeremy. That's Mike. And today's topic is going to be the GOP's relentless assault on America's voting rights. They're behind the scenes, quietly, not so quietly in a lot of cases, trying to make it harder, more difficult for Americans to vote in the upcoming election.
Or impossible for some people.
Or impossible. They've got different methods. They've got gerrymandering, which we'll go over, different ways of subversion. We have digital subversion anymore with social media, places like YouTube and other right-wing networks, even Fox News, places that amplify the messages that these people are trying to put out. If it were up to them, they would all be paper ballot counted by hand. And if you don't make it to the polls, oh, well, that's pretty much what they would do. So
what are they going to do? Bring all the troops home to vote for that one day?
I know, right? Yeah. How are they want to get rid of early voting. They want to get rid of paper or mail-in ballots. They basically want you to show up, and I'm surprised they don't start charging poll taxes like they used to back in the 1800s. But we have a lot of good stuff lined up for you. We are going to be pretty much passengers on this show because we are not experts on this topic, but we do have somebody with us that does know a lot about it. We actually have a couple of guests with us today, so we are really excited. Returning back to the show, we have Tammy Moyer, who is our resident expert on voting rights. And once again, I think for your third time now, actually both of you, I think it's your third time, we have Liz Mikitarian, the founder of Stop Moms for Liberty, a group we've been working with to try and stop fascism from entering our public schools. How's everybody doing today?
Good. How are you both doing?
You. Now, Liz, how's your knee doing? You had knee surgery last time. You were off camera.
It's coming along. Don't get old. I'm telling you, just don't do it.
The alternative.
Yeah.
I wish it was that easy. I really wish it was that easy.
I know, right?
So right now, I guess let's go over a couple of different things that they are trying to do. The basic terms that you hear a lot, like subversion and gerrymandering, and just so people have an idea of what we're talking about, because I had to look it up just to get the exact definition as well. Subversion or subvert is to overturn or overthrow from the foundation, to pervert or corrupt by undermining the morals, allegiance, or faith. And then when you go to gerrymandering, the practice of dividing or arranging territorial unit into election districts in a way that gives one political party an unfair advantage in elections. And we've been hearing about that a lot lately with a lot of counties going to court over their districts being completely gerrymandered and unfair.
Some of them are ridiculous. You look at one of these congressional maps and you're like, okay, it kind of makes sense if they were in little blocks, but then you have something the shape of like intestines running through half the state, and then there's like, it makes no sense. And you start to look at it, and anyone with some sense realizes they're drawing to get groups of people included or excluded, which would then directly influence how those votes count.
Mm-hmm. They ought to have on that thing that this is how DeSantis was elected.
Oh,
exactly. I want to. Oh, go ahead, Tammy.
We'll go over some numbers when I'm getting to go over some of the details on the gerrymandering. Wisconsin was one of the most gerrymandered states in the United States until they just were able to get those maps redrawn before the next election. But the numbers on it are staggering for a split state.
Yeah.
And it's now the GOP, like we call it, the government of Putin, they are trying legally to change as many laws and pass as much BS legislation as they can while they still have power. Because they realize, I think, that their platform, they don't have a platform. Their only way of winning is to cheat or, well, I mean, I guess you could call it cheating, but they're doing it legally at the moment.
They're
So,
trying
but I
to
want to kind of
invalidate votes.
right. They're really trying to invalidate millions of votes. I mean, even them talking about changing the voter age from 18 to 21, that would invalidate probably 10 to 15 million votes.
Well, that's a direct, and you know what's funny is I'll pull that up right now. That's a direct challenge to the rise in youth vote. Okay. This is a snapshot of midterm elections. And we know the last midterm election had a huge youth turnout. But, I mean, it's pretty clear that the Republicans are afraid of young people voting. That might have something to do with the attack on TikTok.
And
But
Taylor Swift.
they don't like people who are young and impressionable to learn as much as they can. They want to constrict that knowledge, constrict that opinion, and make sure they don't know that there's other people like them. They want those queer kids to feel like they're the only queer kids. They don't want to realize that there are statistics that we could have 50% of the population that falls on the queer spectrum. And I don't care, but they do. They're offended by it. So how do they stop that voter base, the ones that are turning out in record numbers? They raise the voting age, or they restrict the knowledge transfer, the TikTok, the social media, the way that young people are learning about things instead of just being told and believe what their parents tell them. That's what they're afraid of.
And I want to get both of your opinion, Tammy and Liz, on this. Now, I like American history. I like history of all kinds anyway. So I looked up, I like to look up the evolution kind of voting rights in America. So when we first became a country, we started the whole democratic process. Only white males who owned property could vote. That was the initial voting base. Then we evolved to after end of slavery, they were then the African American community was given the right to vote, which we could get into on paper. Okay, on paper, but then it was left up to the states to regulate the enforcement of that. In which then we had the Jim Crow laws, we had poll taxes, literacy tests to be able to vote.
And they're talking about civics tests now.
Yeah,
exactly.
We don't even teach civics
anymore. Trying to go back to it.
I've been bitching about that for years. Civics was one of my favorite schools subjects, and Tammy, you'll be able. I know you took a civics class in college because I did, and it was so much fun learning about how not just how government works, but how society fits into government and the responsibility of citizens to make that government work. They don't teach that anymore.
And then we have the 19th Amendment. Finally, the women were given the right to vote in 1920, I believe it was ratified. I think I have it here.
Only 50
Passed
more years
by
till
Congress,
they can get a
June
credit card.
4th, 1990, ratified August 20th, the 19th Amendment granted women the right to vote. And then what we were talking about, like the Jim Crow laws, that ended up with the 80 years later almost, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. That's kind of where we ended up at. A lot of things happened in between. Yeah, but then we go to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Now, do you guys know the story? I've heard the term Bloody Sunday before, but I did not know that had to do with the forming of the Voting Rights Act in 1965.
Yeah, it did in the Edmund Pettus Bridge.
Yes, that was it. Thank you. And then it gave, finally. So let me just go over this. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is a landmark piece of federal legislation in the United States that prohibits racial discrimination in voting. It was signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson during the height of the Civil Rights Movement. August 6, 1965, Congress later amended Act 5 times to expand its protections. It's kind of where the video I got into at the beginning, that was from 2 years ago. That was Chuck Schumer talking about they turned down just to open up a discussion to expand voting rights protections. Like Republicans don't even want to talk about but the protection. So I guess my question is, how far back do you guys think they want to take us?
They want to undo core components of the Voting Rights Act, and that's not even hyperbole. This is literally, they've already done that in two big cases, going back to 2013 for the first one, which was Shelby v. Holder. In that case, they were first getting rid of Section 5. Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act was the one that required either court or government approval for any voting laws to be changed in order to protect it, so they couldn't enact new legislation to be regressive on that. Shelby v. Holder removed that oversight from the process, so states could just put whatever voting laws they wanted in place with no check. So that fifth section of the Voting Rights Act was already wiped out. Section 2 was then challenged under Bronovich versus the DNC. It weakened the private right of action of citizens to bring court cases in front of legislatures to challenge voting right maps, specifically on racial lines. We are seeing examples of both successful and unsuccessful challenges to voting right or to voting districting maps, both at the state and federal level, in multiple states, multiple districts, and we're getting conflicting rulings depending on where and what judges we're looking at. So I've got a lot that I can talk about on this.
What's really funny is I think I actually have an overlay that mentions what you just said, and it kind of gives a history. I know it's from it ends at 2013, but that's just like Tammy said, when we had the first real challenge or loss of the effectivity of those the Voting Rights Act. So you look at, this is the impact of Voting Rights Act on just minority voter turnout in presidential elections. So obviously there was almost none. And then we got the Voting Rights Act, and boom, look what happens. Minorities start participating because the laws aren't allowing them to be excluded. They're now voting. And then boom, 2013, what happens right after a period where it was at the highest? Oh, it goes down because states now are starting to pass more exclusionary, more anti-minority. It's a pattern. It's a pattern they've been trying to do for as long as they've been around and in power. It's like undeniable. They don't want minorities to vote. And by minorities, they don't want black people to vote. They don't want any brown person to vote. They don't want any queer person to vote. I guarantee you they would prefer if women didn't vote, because what happened when women turned out in the last midterms, they punished the shit out of people who tried to who got rid of Roe v. Wade and were trying to get rid of it at a state level. So look who the people that they don't want to vote, all the people that they're attacking, that the rest of us on the right side of history are trying to help get the voice that they deserve, that's being constantly wrestled from them. It's pretty clear.
Section 2 was recently gutted, wasn't it?
Only in one part of the country. So in the Fifth Circuit, this was the first of the two rulings on cases related to Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. We had cases in that area in both Georgia and Alabama, and we had separate cases in a different district in Louisiana as well. Those states all had challenges to their congressional map saying that it was not proportionally representing minority communities. Section 2 states that if you have essentially 33% of your population is African American, you need to have 33% of your districts be majority African American districts to prevent the minority vote from being diluted. In all of those states, they were short on representing minorities, by very little surprise to anyone who pays attention, I'm sure. But in all three of those states' cases, it was ruled that they were violating the Voting Rights Act. And that included the Alabama case got kicked up to the Supreme Court that, believe it or not, upheld the private right of action and supported the decision of the very conservative, largely Trump-appointed circuit court in the 8th, who said, no, we're not going against clear law and precedent that has existed since 1965. They at least did their job. Now you get into the Fifth Circuit. There was a case in Arkansas where, same situation, state legislature, 5 seats were taken away from potential minority majority districts. So that is a big swing in representation, and it's severely diluting the minority vote. Fifth Circuit, even though there had just been a Supreme Court decision saying private right of action existed and was to be protected, they came out and said, nope, we don't agree. Fifth Circuit, which is the Dakotas, Minnesota, Arkansas, I think Missouri is one of the other ones. It's that big stretch right down the middle.
Yeah.
None of them now are allowed
Here.
to bring cases unless it is brought by the Attorney General of the United States.
Right. So
And
not
less
even.
than 10% of all voting maps challenges have been done by the
Let me
Well,
play
that's
this
concentrating
video. I
the
have a-
voting power into one person who's
Yeah,
not
I
an
have,
elected official, by the way.
Yeah.
I do have a video a little bit on section 2. Let me go ahead and play this video real quick.
The Voting Rights Act is one of our country's most important pieces of legislation. It is the literal safeguard that ensures access to the very democracy that is America's bedrock. Now, this one piece of policy was born out of the struggle and sacrifice of the civil rights era, and it has protected Black Americans from myriad attempts to weaken their political power. Now, nearly 60 years after its original passing in 1965, it is once again under attack. A federal appeals court ruled earlier this week that private citizens and civil rights groups cannot sue under a key section of the Voting Rights Act. Private citizens, like the NAACP, the ACLU, the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights, and a host of others, are now prohibited from serving as the guardians they've been in protecting the right to vote at a time when it certainly seems like efforts to restrict voting access are at an all-time high. The provision in question is known as Section 2, which imposes a permanent nationwide ban on racial discrimination in election and voting laws. This ruling does not alter Section 2, but it would essentially render it useless.
Hey, look, that's the Fifth Circuit that I was just talking about.
Oh,
So,
okay, cool.
Did I hear
Perfect.
an echo?
Yeah.
Well,
But
it's
yeah,
funny because go ahead, Jeremy.
No, I find it amazing that the amount of underlying fascism that really runs this country is staggering. And in a lot of states, I actually feel bad for those people that live there. I mean, their lives are being ruined.
Yeah,
I mean,
Liz.
Liz in Florida, of all places. I mean,
You are the test bed for American fascism.
We are.
unfortunately.
We keep saying we're the laboratory. Jeremy, I have to share an aha moment that you just gave me. That
Okay.
one graphic that talked about women earn the right to vote, 1919, 1920.
Yep.
It was like this mind-blowing experience because I just realized for the first time that my mother, who is now long gone, but my mother was born without the right to vote.
wow.
You
That's
know,
amazing to think of
that
something
go-
like that. You know
I
what
keep
mean?
hearing that. I see that a lot when I watch. Full disclosure, I'm not going to say an unhealthy amount of time, but a lot of time watching videos produced by Black creators about
Mhm.
the history. And
Mhm.
it's amazing when you really think that none of this history was that long ago. Okay.
Yeah,
Jim
yeah.
Crow was not long ago. Slavery
No.
was not long ago.
No, it
We're talking
wasn't.
about just women not having credit cards until the late
In the
70s.
70s. Yeah,
But we're
that's my
talking about
lifetime, guys.
so I know my grandparents, two in particular. My grandfather traveled once to the South back in the day, and it's a story that I never heard from him because I was too young when he passed. But my grandma and my mother always tell me, or have told me, that he was so amazed when he went down there and actually saw colored water fountains. Okay, when you grew up in New York. Yeah, we've always had racism and there's always been segregation to some degree, maybe not on the books, but social. But when you go down back during that time as someone who did
Mhm.
not see that overt in your face racism, that wasn't that long ago. It was
Nope.
No.
right there. Like,
I mean,
come
hell, I
on.
was stationed in South Carolina when the whole Confederate flag coming down thing was going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus. I
Like
mean,
none of
still,
this is ancient history. And that's, I think,
It's not.
what's important to understand, what a lot of these fascists refuse or can't understand about America, is the whole idea that we are an experiment. It's an ongoing process, and the Constitution was crafted in a way to allow it to be amended as not just history progressed, but as society evolved. Maybe they wouldn't have been able, due to their upbringing and educations and knowledge at the time, understood queer culture, but they knew enough that something would change, that we had to leave it in the ability of the Constitution to adapt. But we have fascists who believe deep down that our Constitution was created just for white Christian men. And it doesn't even say anything about that in the Constitution. So if you want to know what the true motives are about the people who are doing everything to gerrymander, to limit voting rights, to do everything to keep democracy from thriving, it goes back to who they want to have the right to vote and who they don't.
Absolutely. Now, if it was up to Republicans, I'm just going to play this quick video because it makes me giggle every single time. But this is what they would go to. This is the Iowa caucus when they were voting for Trump. Like, this is what they call election
integrity.
This is election integrity, according to the Republicans. Here you go. It's in there. It's like, so dumb. Come on.
The best part is that, quote, the official isn't even the only one holding it. She's like, you guys just pass it around.
Oh, I bet that bag was made in Venezuela.
Oh my God. Look at this.
That is voting according to...
Is anyone checking how many pieces of paper are being put in there?
Yeah, I was about to say, how were we knowing that somebody's not stuffing the ballot box?
Well, they're good Christians, Tammy. You have to understand. These people are just good God-fearing Christians who are there to lie.
In their dystopian brains, that makes sense to them. They're like, that is more secure than electronic ballot. Like, you guys are idiots.
Look, I don't think you've seen enough movies, Jeremy. Hackers are real. And hackers, they go in there and they hack things. And they hack things that we don't like. And as Christians, we don't like everything. So hackers are bad.
Hackers are real. I have friends who literally work as white hackers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the same time, it ain't like what they're saying.
Of course it isn't.
No.
Oh, but are you sure they're not beaming messages up to the satellites, which are the... Okay, look.
Space laser.
Oh, yeah, well... And
which
religion is in charge of those space lasers. But it's funny, it just goes to show again how little these people actually understand about reality. We're talking about a computer system that literally is just tabulating the votes. Does anyone remember Scantrons in school?
Yes.
That's what these voting things are. As a student, I used to color in the designs because I never studied. And it worked. I ended up as a C student. It was great. But in reality, when it comes to voting, it's very specific. There's not that many options. You literally are checking off. It's telling you the answers. You just got to pick the one you want. And it's not like these things are then sending messages. They don't understand. When it's done, someone has to literally go and take the hard drive out. And no one's beaming shit. They don't have Wi-Fi capability. Like, they're just making up, and they think that all technology is all linked by the Matrix. And Keanu Reeves is going to ninja your vote out of reality. Like, what is going on with these people?
And we laugh at that kind of stuff, Mike, but that's what's actually happening right now. And the powers that be are supporting that wave of thinking. And so it's so important for us to become a better educated citizenry, to, listen to some case studies like Tammy's bringing to us, and to realize the structure of voting. Typically people you don't talk about religion, you don't talk about politics, right? They always say, don't do that amongst family. Sorry, we are beyond that. We must discuss policy, practice that is happening. And that's all politics, folks, because that's what rules our lives. That's what takes rights away. We've seen the attack on women's rights. We've seen all of the attacks on the LGBTQ plus community. And we can't have these little blinders on and think that, it doesn't really impact me, and I don't want to bother, getting involved in that. Really, when your rights are taken away, then it will be too late for you to be involved.
Right, because eventually something of yours will be taken away. You
Absolutely.
just don't realize it yet. You think you're
Well,
all on the same side
Last holiday, sitting
until
there
you
with
do
my
something.
family.
Yep.
They've accepted who I am, but they're sitting there talking about votes and
Yep.
like they're not fully on board with all blue and
Mhm.
sitting
Mhm.
there talking about how Chick-fil-A is the best sandwich. It's like, you guys
Look,
realize that you're funding my death?
Chick-fil-A
Yeah.
is delicious, but I haven't eaten them in 15 years because they're assholes. That's all I'm
Yep.
going to say.
Yeah.
But it's funny you say that,
That's
Tammy,
funny.
because that goes to show the depth of cognitive dissonance where someone or a group of people can come to terms with a part that they originally thought they couldn't, but they can't take the next step to truly understand all the tendrils
Right.
that are reaching out into it. So
Mhm.
they might think an innocuous vote for Chick-fil-A, and I'm just making up a theoretical vote for Chick-fil-A, is okay because their chicken's good. But then when you say, yeah, but they literally support my death, they can't just make that step, or they're unwilling to go, I got to cut off completely. Why? Because their identity has been Republican for so long. It's hard to break away. See, this is something that I've always believed. The Republican identity very much becomes who people are. A
Mhm.
progressive identity just includes people that have different identities, but I myself am not queer. I don't take on the progressive things that I support. I just support them. But Republicans often are what they support. And that's how do you break away from that? I don't
That's a
know.
good
Can
point.
confirm
Yeah.
from being part of it for far too long.
I know.
Mhm.
I know.
And they're
It's
not
scary.
even. I want to talk about the importance of. I mean, you have to have options if you want people to be more involved in politics. You can't restrict their options. You can't take away mail-in ballots. Obviously, there's people that are stationed overseas that require that stuff. You can't take them away. They want to just almost erase your vote from existence. It seems like so it doesn't even,
Yeah.
regardless if you cast it or not.
I know.
So for addressing this on what's the practical element here, right? So
Mhm.
with our group, we have to work on elections and candidacies because we can't just wait around because there is a whole structured plan on that side of things to elect candidates, to get into those positions of power. And if we're not playing that same game, we will be left behind.
Mhm.
Ugh.
And I'm not either one of the political parties, and I am that way intentionally.
Yep.
And I will stay that way because of the role I'm playing in this national organization.
Mhm.
Because I don't want someone coming after me saying, oh, well, you're just this, big liberal Democrat, blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
No, I'm not. I am for just what our society as a whole needs to be, and that is middle of the road. And
Right,
that's
it does.
not what the other side is
Yep.
pushing for.
I
There is an
No.
exclusionary push, and ours is just the opposite of that.
I-
So,
I
Now,
think I've
with you,
always. Oh, go ahead, Jamie.
well, I was gonna say before I even got into politics, like I said, I've only been involved in this stuff like less than 3 years now.
mhm,
The push all the way down the line. I mean, I'm not talking in just Congress, but with
Right.
you, Liz, with
Right.
dealing with Moms for Liberty, they're trying to infect school boards, local legislation, literally everything they can possibly get
Well-
their hands on.
Well, and that's not accidental, Jeremy. That is the plan because typically across the United States, school board elections have been the most unknown, the
Yep.
most poorly,
Yep.
the most poor turnout
Yep,
of
yep.
voters. And people just didn't even, focus on what was going on. And so the powers that be that want to move us to this extremist agenda for a country, they realize that. And that's why they have no thoughts about doing something for children. Let's
No,
not
no.
be, confused by the mantra that they
These are
state
people that
they-
think kids belong to them.
well,
That-
and they are not in this to do good
No.
for students. They are in this for power alone.
They're
And
not even
so-
educators.
Yeah. So we understand now that if we attack this with fact, and if we inform more people that they won't be successful at
Yep.
the school board member. We've
It-
seen that downward trajectory from the fall of 22, which I think you had some stats up on, till now, and we're hoping for really great results come this fall, but it's been a
Yep.
downward slide. They
Well-
had this big thing because they kind of took us off guard in the fall of 22. That's when
Yep.
they flipped school boards to
Yep.
have all of this craze, be approved. My own school board flipped. So,
Yep.
I'm not talking about, possibilities. I'm talking about the reality because I'm living it. And even themselves are now realizing, which is interesting, that their image has been soiled, right? Their brand has been
Tarnished a little bit
tarnished. Yeah,
Yeah.
tarnished is a perfect word for it, right? So they're getting very strategic. They're recognizing that, and they're getting more underhanded than they have been in the past.
Well, the overt shittiness
Desperation.
was enough to attract the average ignorant, angry person. But they know that only gets them so far, because just like Donald Trump could only achieve so much, and you have someone like a Mike Johnson who is a true Christian nationalist who has the
Right.
polish, you
a
can't
nightmare.
just ham fist your way through this. And part of that design is a failing of civics education and other things, where we have come as a country to believe that the president is a sorcerer with a magic wand. And this is something that I've always believed comes out in how a Donald Trump views Obama or Biden. He's someone who's ignorant, who truly believes the president, even though he wants to turn it into a dictatorship, he's someone who believes that the president has powers that he does not have. That the president can just go, I decree. Yes, in a fascist situation, yes. But when you look at what you're bringing up, Liz, and how Tammy is talking about, state legislatures, this is what, and I'm going to head right towards Liz's favorite topic, this is what down ballot voting is about. Because you could vote for president, but that's not going to affect your school. I mean,
Right.
if you have a fascist in there that passes draconian laws that affect every citizen, sure. But right now, while we still have an semblance of a democracy, we have people that are being elected to run school boards who were literally just teaching their kids in homeschool. We have now homeschool mothers running school boards.
Right.
If you're not someone who was trained in education, understands how education works, educational theory, all of that, you do not have a right to make a decision on anyone's children, especially public school.
I'm going to call you out a little bit on that,
Do it.
Mike.
Do it.
There is that wave of thinking, right? That
Mhm.
you have to have children in the public school system to serve as a good representative as a school board member. But my contention is that really isn't what the predetermined status has to be.
Got it.
You can have children that are homeschooled. You can have children even that go to private school, like Bridget Ziegler in Sarasota, Florida. Her kids have never gone to public schools, and yet she's serving. She's a really bad example because she's a horrific school board member. But
Yeah, I've seen
if
videos.
you have the support piece of truly wanting public schools to thrive, then it can be anybody on a school board. But you hit the key. It has to be that dedication to the school, public school system, and it has to be a knowledge base. Because frankly, what I've seen across this country with some of these people, even in my own area, that have been elected, they don't know anything about education. They don't know
I was gonna say that.
anything about child development.
So we
So
need
I'm sitting here, right, with this.
professionals.
Yeah, I'm sitting here with this, body of experience, knowing what we should be doing for children and how to educate children and how the brain works. And yet I'm being told, oh no, we need to have prayer meetings in schools. And that's how the children are going to really be educated.
Well,
Put
but that's
the Bible back in a school. That's
that's
gonna work.
exactly true, because there are people that, we think prayer should be in school. Which prayer? Which denomination? Which
Exactly.
religion? But again, this all starts down ballot. So the definition of down ballot is basically, down ballot is the term used to refer to local, state, and national elected officials below the office of President of the United States. So it's important to understand, most people look at elections as just the president. And to be fair, for the most part, it is. But we've already been voting down vote. Every Senate race, every congressional race is getting closer and closer to affecting your lives. They're the ones that decide in those committees which districts get the most money. But it's more than that. because down ballot voting is an important way for citizens to express their preferences in terms of local policy, civics, and it also reflects how our democracy works. By voting down ballot, citizens can express their opinion on issues such as education, healthcare, taxation, and transportation, as well as on the individuals running for office. So, for example, this is the stuff that directly affects in your neighborhood, in your school, representation, diversity, values, civic duty, social responsibility. The president can only affect things on a national scale,
Right.
more or less as a nudge. Okay, but the people that are going to your town hall meetings are the ones that are going to take away your ability to do things. For example, my Nassau County legislator, I'm in Suffolk County in Long Island, the Nassau County legislator is now being sued by Letitia James because he decided that he's going to place a ban on transgender kids in state facilities for sports. So guess what? We voted, now not me, I'm in Suffolk, but Nassau County residents at some point, whether they checked the box or didn't or whatever, elected that person. Now that might kick out their kid. Okay. The people that are against transgender identity, they don't care. They're happy for this. But if you care and you didn't vote, or you voted for him without researching it,
now down
you don't
ballot,
know what this person's going to do. That's down ballot.
Right.
And-
The down ballot's not just
And-
for like a midterm. There's also special elections.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. This is the first time my son
I know.
came
Tell me, what
home
were you
one
gonna say?
day. He was like, I voted, Dad. I'm like, voted
No.
for what? I didn't even know the special election was, or local election was going on. I was like, shit, I got to go vote. So I'm like, but
And a
truth
child
is-
shall lead.
But you know what, though? Like, my son is the type of person where I don't get involved with politics with him. I tell him, like, you should pay attention because he's 19 now.
Yeah.
He also is part Mexican and he is part of the LGBTQ community. So I tell him, like, look,
Better fucking vote.
I agree that politics is a nightmare. I mean, honestly, some of this shit is so entertaining. Like, I don't know how these people don't forget to breathe sometimes, but at the same time, these people have been elevated to such positions where they can do so much damage to so many lives.
And
I
they
mean, we
want
talked
to do
about
that.
on the last episode. I mean, we're talking about neighbors reporting neighbors. You know, they have Mexicans in their house. You better come
Go,
grab them.
Tammy.
I mean,
Go.
Florida, Liz,
No.
Florida, did they pass a law where the
Yes.
state can come into your house and take transgender kids out of the house?
Yeah.
No,
It didn't get
and that's
through, but
that's
Oh,
actually
okay. He tried to get it through.
They still
not.
tried. That's despicable.
But hold on,
Right.
hold on. That's actually on the other side of this debate, and there's something to be said for children who are abused in the home because they are part of a trans community or part of LGBTQ plus community. So I'm not saying the government should really, be allowed to go and take someone's children, but there is something to be said for children are being abused. And
There is,
is
you're right.
this something that we can use? So that's not something that
Got it.
I think it needs
Okay,
to be
so-
looked at to make
It
sure
has to
that
be
the
more
government
carefully crafted.
does it right. Yes. A
Now, the
corrective
part-
measure, yes, but be careful what you ask for because
Right.
if they can come and get children for
Yes.
any reason,
Yeah,
right?
it's
it
what they
impacts everyone.
define. Once that
Yeah.
law's on the books, how do they define abuse? Tammy, I think, has something to say
Yep.
about this.
well, a few things, but
Good.
the specific wording on the first law that was being put forward about being able to seize trans children from their families included from out of state. Didn't matter if you were a Florida resident. If you came in to visit Florida with a trans child, or if you were a trans adult with a child, it would be considered child abuse and they would be taken from you. That was abhorrent and terrifying.
That is awful.
But also, just a reminder to anyone watching, down ballot is where the policies really hit you. Yes,
Absolutely.
the Supreme Court removed Roe v. Wade, but it's the states like Louisiana passing their own state law because states' rights are paramount that are the ones that are making the effects. And also, the state legislatures make your legislative maps. When we had so many state elections and congressional elections go red in 2016, that did more damage than with Trump. Because then they're the ones who are now in positions when
Yes.
that census came through before the next president's taking office. They're ramming things through as quickly as possible to get those maps in place. And
I
they're
agree.
so hard to break unless it's with better down ballot voting to undo it.
Perfect.
And I can either go into Wisconsin now, or we could save that for a little bit later. But
Well, let
I
me
know
get
Liz has
into a
plenty to
little
talk
bit.
about on identifying good down ballot candidates too.
That's right. We do
Yes,
need
yes.
definitely need to talk about that. Let me play a video real quick. This is a little bit from the because they're not even making a secret anymore. They are so loud and proud about making things difficult for people to vote. Like they're really happy about this. Let me play this video. This is Laura Trump, the new co-chair of the RNC. By the way, the RNC or MAGA publicans, as me and Mike like to call them, have recently appointed disgraced Trump lawyer and election denier Christina Bobb to oversee the election integrity. I'm like,
They have no
I
shame.
don't even know what to say sometimes. It's so maddening. But let me go ahead and play this video real quick. They're just not even, they're just happy about it.
Stunning comments from Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, who now runs the RNC, about voting in America. They're from a new video that's been posted online. In it, she spells out a goal, which, if achieved, would radically reshape U.S. voting laws and impose broad new draconian restrictions. And she implies that her father-in-law is on board.
Once Donald Trump is president of the United States, once we have a huge majority in the House, because that's also something that needs to happen this election cycle, and we take back the Senate, then you can change the voting laws. Then you could have 1 day of voting. You could have paper ballots. You could have voter ID.
It's a breathtaking goal, calling for, quote, 1 day of voting, meaning an end to early voting and an end to mail-in voting. Roughly 100 million Americans voted early in 2020.
Million?
She's also pushing the right-wing plan to enact stricter voter ID
That's
laws,
two-thirds
which would have a
of the
disparate
entire
impact
vote,
on
isn't it?
communities of color.
So
And
That's what I'm
She
saying, like
has.
two-thirds of the votes in the last election were freaking early voting or paper
well,
ballot.
so
So
this
take
is,
away, so out of 100, take away 100 million votes.
Yep.
Invalid.
that's
You
what they
can't
want.
mail them in. You can't go. You
Well,
do it early.
let's-
You're
let's
done.
take a look.
100 million votes. Go on.
I have two slides that go right into this, and it's kind of scary because when you listen to what RNC Chair Laura Trump is saying, it's brilliant how they show or they express what could be even a glimmer of truth wrapped in their shit sandwich. So, for example, they don't want 1 day of voting, and the reason is because they've always voted down the idea of having Election Day be a national holiday.
Yeah.
So, number one, if you want a big turnout on 1 day, make it a national holiday so people don't have to work on that.
They don't want
That's
that.
number one.
Makes sense.
They
Number
don't
two,
want that.
Number two, let's look, for example, at the difference between Republicans and Democrats and their opinion on voting as a right versus a privilege. So basically, the right feels that voting is a privilege, and the left feels that voting is a right. I was under the impression that the Constitution grants us rights, not privileges. A privilege is something like being indicted for a crime or arrested for a crime you could pay your way out of. That's a privilege. A right is you are born or are then naturalized or whatever it is, and you have the
You know
right
what,
to
that
vote.
just hit me. Poll taxes are privileges.
Yes,
Uh,
they are.
Yes, that's why they're illegal.
Or what being a property owner, that's a privilege. Like
Exactly.
you
You
shouldn't
got it.
have to meet certain requirements. Like there are certain things that Americans have that you turn 18, you're an American citizen. You know what? You might not have much, but you at least get to
You
choose.
have the right to vote.
So
Exactly.
by
And they
not
wanna
making it
take
a
that
holiday,
fundamental right away.
by not making it a holiday and by forcing it to be 1 day, if you are of working age or if you have children, you are getting into that poll line with everyone else at the same time.
Yep.
They're putting restrictions on
Yeah.
when the polls have to close by a certain time.
Yep.
So if you get in a line that's too long for you to get to the polls before they close,
Whoops.
you're just out. But guess who can show up in droves? Retired, older Americans who largely vote Republican. This is not
For now.
a bug,
Now
it
we're
is a
seeing the end
feature.
game here.
But wait,
It is.
so
And don't give them water when they're standing
yeah,
in that
don't give
line
them
either.
No
water.
shit. Like, what is going on with that? What
I
was
know,
that
right?
about?
because they are
Don't give
actual
them
monsters.
water, like,
But
what?
here's a perfect example of when someone like a Laura Trump is talking about which voting laws and stuff people do support. So green is in favor, red is opposing. Required photo ID. 79% in 2022 agree that we should have voter ID. You know what? I don't mind voter ID as long as the ID is free. Whatever, fine. But now you go to the bottom. Limiting number of drop boxes. Well, most people don't agree with that. But
No.
drop boxes have to do with early voting. So what does that
And
mean?
location.
And location.
And
So
location.
we know, I think it was in Georgia, they were removing the drop boxes from black neighborhoods.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So now you have gerrymandering to make the black vote count less. And then in the areas where black votes count more, they take away the voting boxes. But look here, most people are in favor of early voting. So again, people are in favor of the opposite of what the Republicans are trying to do, because most people want more people to be able to vote.
I agree.
It's
Yeah.
not that complicated.
You know what?
Well, it's kind of a pattern, right? They are against what the majority of Americans really want. Like, they don't want book banning, right? And yet the
Right.
Republican Party is all over that issue too.
Yeah, no kidding. We have about 15 minutes left. What I wanted to talk to is the voluntary influence of these massive right-wing networks. We have like Truth Social. Even Twitter is just a cesspool of right-wing
Twitter is a
nut jobs.
right-wing social
Mhm.
media.
It really
Full
is.
stop.
And I mean, and I honestly, I'll say it, Twitter used to be way more fun before Elon Musk got involved. It was a very informative,
Because it's a
intuitive
Nazi
platform.
racist cesspool of stupid.
Right.
I heard this
Now we
morning
have
they're down
entire
20%
platforms,
users.
though.
I know,
We
that's
have
a big
entire
number. Danny.
platforms
Jesus.
digitally subverting the next. Not only are they trying to subvert them, they're already trying to question the integrity
Mhm.
of the next election. Not only are they still promoting the big lie, which has been debunked almost 70 times now in court. They're now, even Donald Trump is going on. This is going to backfire in their faces hilariously. He is going around telling his conspiracy theorist base that the 2024 election is already rigged. He's going to end up. He's going to end up.
Wow,
psyching
are
them
we
out.
good?
Right. Well, we're not going to go ahead and vote because Donald Trump said the vote's already rigged. So we're not going to go out and vote. Okay,
Yeah, they'll
great.
try everything.
Good job. Don't vote. We don't care.
Mhm,
It'll
mhm.
help us out.
Yeah.
No,
But
Not
the
the smartest.
influence,
Yeah.
like Fox News and other propaganda networks on the subversion, because that's what they're doing. They're trying to
Mhm.
subvert the next election. They're trying to all put Donald Trump back into power.
Mhm.
Do you think, I don't even know how to phrase this. I like the platforms because we can use it for the forces of good.
Mhm.
But do you guys think they're monitored enough, or is this something that should be addressed more often? Like Meta just started they were starting to restrict political content. You actually have to go into Instagram now, and if you want political content, because the option for restricting political content now is automatically on. So you have to physically go in there and select that you want political content to show up.
Yeah, this whole, I guess, approach to social media is really they put the cart before the horse on it.
Mhm.
And then they
And
shot the
these
horse.
things were not done ahead of this vehicle coming into our society. Right
Oh,
now,
true.
the issue is AI. And they're
Oh,
also
yeah.
trying to figure out, can we do something? Can we not? I mean, America should be scared that they can make a fake video. And this is on either side, right?
Oh, yeah.
That they can make a
Absolutely.
fake video where either, Donald Trump
Anyone.
or Hillary Clinton is saying things that they're controlling that
Yep.
looks just like them. That should be
Well-
concerning to all people.
Well, hey, Donald Trump
But
has already
actually-
said all those videos of him drooling when he speaks and misstepping are all AI.
Well,
though
I
he
don't know about
posted.
that.
We had a video the other day that I almost didn't play because I couldn't confirm it.
Yeah.
Because it was Donald Trump. It was the back of his head and just
Yep.
his voice. And I'm like, shit, if we show
Vetting
this,
is going to
I'm
become
wrong.
a
You know what I'm saying?
full-time
Like I had to
job.
question myself. And luckily we ended up verifying it
Mhm.
like a half an hour before the show. So we played the video.
You were worried
But
about
you're
that.
right. AI is going to play a
Yeah.
huge part. I mean, what
What
was
I'm
the one, the
worried about-
Pentagon?
Oh, go
Remember the
ahead.
picture of the Pentagon that showed up on Twitter? Ended up
Oh,
the
yeah.
stock market started to plummet.
I know,
Yeah,
right?
What I'm worried about isn't just what can be said, it could be what's shown. So, for example, who's to say someone can't make a video of a nuclear bomb going off in Kiev?
Correct.
Guess what? If the right people or the wrong people see a video that they cannot
They're going to
prove as
respond to.
false of a freaking nuclear bomb, NATO's going to hit the button and say, all our nukes, let's go.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
that is not
it's
science
terrifying.
fiction anymore. Science fiction predicts
I know.
our reality, but then we often tend not to put we don't learn from science fiction, unfortunately. People want to make laws based on the Bible, but no one wants to make laws based on Isaac Asimov. And I got to tell you, I'm more interested in what Isaac Asimov had to say than Paul and John and all these other guys with white names in the Middle East. But we're getting to the point where someone's got to find a way to vet this, police this, and prevent it from causing a major international incident, because it's not going to be that hard. It really isn't.
Yeah, it
So
won't
I
be
guess,
pretty.
all right, so I guess our message is then, if everybody agrees, that be careful, be very, very careful
Absolutely.
what you, not just what you see, but what you share. If you see something online, especially on social media, verify it somehow. Like I'll even see posts, like I'll see a Donald Trump post on Truth Social, or I'll see a Donald Trump video, and I know where it came from. So I'll immediately go to the source. If you could go to the source, find out. But there are very easy ways to fact check a lot of this nonsense that's going on. Google's an
reverse
amazing tool.
image searches. Sometimes like they're using an image for a scene from something that happened 30 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I can also say, I want to add to that. Our side of things needs to get stronger at questioning what other people put up and ask, okay, what is your source? Because I'll tell you, there's some pretty impressive stuff.
Liz,
okay, where do you get that information that there's pornography in school? Where is that coming from?
Every comment.
And a lot of times it does shut down the conversation, but in my mind, that means I won.
No, it does, because
it's hilarious that you said that. We're just laughing because
on
Mike and I do
Instagram,
that.
I get
people Tammy.
saying ridiculous stuff, and my only answer is source with a question mark. And the amount of rage I get if I ask you for a source and your response is rage, or you do it yourself. Okay, let's go into that.
Yeah.
If I'm asking you for a source on a claim you make, and you say it's my job to research that, you now don't understand how our justice system works. Which explains quite a lot. So you say that the sky is pink and the moon is made of cheese. It is not my responsibility to prove your claim. It is considered not real. And forget just how our justice system works. You have now proven you don't understand how the scientific method works. And in reality, this is the basis of why they are the way they are. Excuse me.
You know me, I always try to do like a call to action kind of thing, right? That's what the whole premise of Stop Moms for Liberty is all about. So my call to action is to start finding, where are you? There you are. Start finding people like Tammy that have a knowledge base that you should listen to.
Absolutely.
Start following podcasts like this so you can become more informed. Start realizing that they're very strategic on the other side of things. So now that we know that, they've realized their brand is has been tarnished, as you said before, Jeremy, find out what you can do to find out who people really are, because they do show themselves. In the case of schools, if you have a candidate that's saying, I am here to make sure we have parent rights, they are not on the right side of things. They are the bad guys. And so, look at that kind of information, and for God's sakes, become involved in politics, because it means people's lives. It means decisions are made that impact every one of us, whether you identify with any community or not. When you are losing democracy, like we are slowly seeing unfold, we are all going to lose, folks. And I jokingly say a lot, when they go after little retired fat kindergarten teachers, I'm screwed. Our motto is, who are they going to attack next? So we need to stop this trajectory in the country of a small yet loud and very well funded, unfortunately, minority rules, because that is not what America is about.
No, and I wish I would have had the video that we talked about before the show. That it's going viral, and it's going to probably go mega viral, of a Trump supporter being interviewed. She's wearing a Tucker Carlson shirt, and the guy asked her, who would you rather vote for, Vladimir Putin or Joe Biden? This is an American woman with, I'm assuming, a functioning brain. Questionable. Actually said Vladimir Putin. So, like, that's what we're up against. It's a complete and utter ignorance. They've bought into the cult.
Hey,
They are full-blown members. So we have to become the very loud majority of this country.
Yes.
I think
we already are the majority.
Absolutely.
We just
We
have to
are
We
the
are the
majority.
majority, but we're quiet and we're not unified. We are not unified as a majority.
We're trying, Jeremy. We are working
We
on
are.
it.
Tammy,
We are.
Coalition party won, but you called me an expert in voting rights. I was not an expert very long ago. This is
Exactly.
recent research. I understand how politics work better than most. I grew up with a government teacher for a father. I studied. I stayed up to date with how everything works. So that gave me a base foundation to understand this, but I'm going to trusted sources. I'm finding
Yes.
people that are giving me ideas on where to look. Like for most of what I'm finding out about voting rights violations in current cases, I'm going to a site called Democracy Docket. This is a site that's run by
that's a good one.
Mark Elias and his lawyer team.
Mhm.
They are literally the people who were the plaintiff representatives in 2 of those Voting Rights Act cases that were won. Talk about a primary source of information to go to you can trust on the subject matter. Find verifiable, trusted primary sources. Because by the time you're getting to that person on Instagram who won't give you the source, they're not a primary source. They're not even a secondary source.
They're not even a source.
And Tammy, if you'll work with me and help us to put out some of those resources, we have a pretty large network and it's building every day. We're in 46 states, I believe. So we love when we can share reputable sources. So we
because they're not. It's hard to find. It's hard to hold on to them.
Well, it's a lot of work.
A rock solid one.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and let's face it, right? If we're trying to influence people, we have to make it a little bit easier for them because people are busy. They have lives. I mean, I'm retired. That's why I have the privilege to be able to do this work.
I think you're right. We need to make sure that everyone should vet their own source. But like you're saying, Liz, if we can, as a community, provide ways and pathways to get, not to pre-vetted sources. I don't want to use that term, but I mean ones that are unbesmirchable, if you will. You can, no matter what, we could throw them out there and maybe we did the work and we know that no one's going to be able to undermine them. But we have to be careful.
We also need to become familiar with the sources that are the go-to news sources for this quote unquote research or documentation.
Know thine enemy.
One of them is the Daily Caller. It is a storm. That's for sure. So yeah, I think there's a really wonderful graphic that shows middle of the road media sources as opposed to the two ends of the bell curve. And you know, we are going to try and put out things like that prior to election because you know, we can't fault people for not knowing. I mean, this is coming in my educator hat, right? I'm putting that on. I can't fault people for not knowing. But personally, I think we do need to start faulting ourselves if we don't become part of the education piece that needs to happen to make people better voters.
Hey, you know what? We already made a difference.
What's that?
Right there on the screen.
Loud, proud, and unified. All right.
Good resource. Nice. See, there you go.
No, but it's as simple as that. You know, we have to build trust. And I think trust is in part showing vulnerability. One thing that I love, Liz, is almost every show I go on a rant and you're like, yeah, shut up. This is how it really is.
I've never said it that way.
No, but you said it in the teacher mom way. I recognize because trust me, I recognize it. No, but my point is, if we're not willing to show that our own ignorance or lack of knowledge in a subject can be fixed, if we can grow from that, if we can teach each other, that's the point. None of us are experts in everything. Some of us might be experts in different things. Some of us might be laymen in everything. But if we're willing to learn, if we're willing to put in the effort to read that article, to maybe check that website when we have time, to really educate ourselves, it again goes to show we have to point out that education never ends. It's a mental, it's an outlook on life. I was terrible in school, but the amount of stuff that I have learned outside of school is because education has to come from a willingness at times. Young childhood education, we got to get a base knowledge in there, create actual human beings that know how to function in society.
Yes.
But you can't cram all the knowledge of the world and all the experience and all the history into school. You can't.
No.
There has to be a willingness to learn. And what you don't see on the right is a willingness to learn anything. It's a willingness and a desire and an obsession to reinforce ignorance, to keep one's knowledge base. I have these 10 things that I believe and nothing else, and nothing can stop me from believing those 10 things.
Yeah.
I don't trust anything I know, because there's always a willingness to learn more or have your opinions changed.
It all
That's what
comes
we gotta
down
do.
to what you talk about all the time, Mike. It's about civics education. And it has been pushed out of the public school system
It really is.
on purpose.
Got to get those math scores.
Got to
Only
get
math.
those scores, those standardized test scores up. And in the meantime, we have people that are buying the goods that they are being sold because they can't critically think. They can't, process information, and then I'll even say doubt information.
Oh, yeah.
So that whole aspect of being a good citizen means that you should say, okay, really? Is that what that means? Or really, is that what's going to happen?
Yeah.
That's what's missing.
It doesn't mean
And I
don't
wanna
believe
also-
anything. It just means take a look at it.
Yeah. And if
Yes.
I just want to point out, because I'm not a big reader, I'm very, very auditory. I like to listen to learn, and I'm a very visual auditory learner. So there's all types of sources. Like YouTube's a fantastic source of information if you know where to look.
But you got to vet it.
Obviously, there's a wealth of podcasts out there, and not of all of them I would trust, but there are some. When you find some reliable sources, they are out there now, dedicated to
Not
the
as
truth.
good as this one there, Mike and Jeremy.
Hey, you know
Yay.
what? When we started this project, we both agreed that we wanted to do something political, and it's like like Tammy said, I didn't know anything about any of this stuff. Like most of the stuff we talk about, I learn as we go. It's not like I just wake up and know all these things. But there's so many sources out there that I find it amazing how ignorant this country still is. Because when we grew up, we had to go to the library and look at books with outdated information in them. You know what I'm saying? Now you can get literal in real time information
In your hand.
so there's-
Catalogs and
right, in your
decimal
hand.
systems.
You have a
Right,
supercomputer
I hate
in
the
your
Dewey
hand that can
Decimal.
literally look up anything you want. So if any question pops in your head, Google the shit.
But it's funny, we don't use that. People don't take advantage of that. And I think the availability of all knowledge has ruined the innate concept that maybe truth is rare. Knowledge and experience and understanding is something that is somewhat subjective, because you could say I have knowledge in a subject, but if your knowledge is all wrong, you're not really an expert or you don't know the truth. But when you could just type in, is Biden made of cheese? And you can get 400 articles that say Biden is made of cheese. You're going to go, well, 400 articles said that. Okay, did you look at any other? Did you change the way you looked for that? What type of cheese? No one knows how to then expound on that search.
He
for
would be
knowledge.
blue cheese. Get it?
I hope so.
Oh, sorry. Had to go there.
That was good.
But
That was
like,
a good teacher
I was
joke
a
right
music
there. I like
ed
that.
major.
That was a
Mike
dad joke,
knows this. We were
was a
legitimately
joke.
roommates during college, pre-transition for
Okay.
me by 20 years or whatever. Don't
Oh,
think
shit.
too hard on that, Tammy. But it still is it's not like I'm coming from a place of being a poli-sci major or something like that. I have a base of knowledge in one area, but I've studied others continuously. I find good sources. I make sure that I stay informed, especially now, because you talked about when they get to your demographic way down the line, I'm the first one in line right now.
Yep.
The only people that are ahead of me in line are trans women of color.
Yep.
They get murdered
All right.
Absolutely
raped
true.
at a higher rate than regular white trans women do.
Regular.
That was a wrong term to use. It's not regular. Than white trans women.
I called you on
is
that word.
Awful. That is an awful word.
I was
Do
like,
not-
regular.
It happens. It
Yeah,
happens.
and then like I
unfortunately-
am there. No, that
unfortunately,
was
we are-
awful wording. Shoot myself in the foot.
I love
Why
it.
don't I?
We are over on time. Trust me, it happens to me all the time. That was a show. I like, oh shit, I can't believe I just said that. All right, but anyway, it
You're
happens.
okay, Tammy. You're good.
Yeah, you're
I'm
fine.
talking too much,
Um,
clearly.
That's all we have for today's episode. Unfortunately, I appreciate everybody coming on the show. Liz, Tammy, thanks for coming back on the show. Yeah, I didn't know how this show was going to go because, like I said, all this stuff that we do on this show, I never really looked into what's going on with voting rights. So I was a little hesitant because I don't like to talk about things that I haven't properly learned. But I learned a lot on the show thanks to both of you. So I appreciate
You guys
coming
did
on.
great with pulling in some really impressive overlays for graphics. Thank you for doing
Hey,
that.
considering
research.
we have no budget whatsoever, and
I
we're
know,
just two guys
I
doing
know.
this for a hobby at the moment, we do pretty damn good.
I'm excited for. Oh, go
What's
ahead,
your
Liz.
next topic? I have to ask.
Ah, you took the words out of my mouth. I don't know what the next thing that Jeremy and I are doing on normal shows, but I can say, I think I mentioned it earlier, I'll mention it again because you prompted me, Liz, is that this is the unofficial beginning of a series of informational shows we want to do with Liz's help. She's providing some amazing guests for us.
And congratulations to Tammy. I think I'm pointing somewhere. I don't know. What an outstanding first guest. Thank you, Tammy.
Yeah, no, like
absolutely.
I had no doubt that you were gonna. You've been so over prepared. We didn't get to like a tenth of your information.
Oh, I know.
But
no, we're gonna have
to.
I know. We're gonna do more on voting rights.
We're gonna do more the more we get close. But the next topic we're gonna do in this quote informational series is going to be about dark money in education. With Maurice Cunningham, Dr. Maurice Cunningham, who wrote a very interesting book that I'm going to do my best to read in the next few days, because I believe that show is on April 2nd.
Yes,
and
this is the dark money on the attacks on education.
Yes, like what's funding the attacks on public education?
Because as far as I've seen in my lifetime, there isn't a whole lot of money coming from anywhere into supporting our public schools.
No, you're absolutely right. If anything, they constantly try and cut what goes into the public schools.
The two former teachers in this conversation will agree with that.
Yes, absolutely.
So, but absolutely,
Maurice is amazing, so I look forward to it. When is that?
You're going to be on too, right, Liz?
Yes.
You're going to be on with
us.
us?
April 2nd, I think.
April 2nd.
Next Tuesday, not this Tuesday, but the following Tuesday.
And I'll tell you right now, we're definitely going to have
on the East Coast.
We're definitely going to have the two of you back on together because you guys scare me. You guys are really good.
Oh,
I love it because
my honor.
Again, we want to make sure we're representing the average person, and the average person doesn't know shit about shit. And,
but it doesn't mean
that
you can't
respectfully, meaning you don't know what you don't know. We need people that do research, that have experience, that are fighting the good fight, that are willing to educate people like me and Jeremy. And hopefully viewers can pick up some things along the way.
Yeah, that's even something as small as, do we know what terminology to look for in candidates?
Excellent.
So, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. It's been a great show. We got a lot of comments we got to go through. Sorry we couldn't display some more of them on the air. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We are now on Instagram.
Please subscribe. Awesome.
Hopefully the Instagram thing worked. This is the first time we tried it. It did? Okay, cool. We're good. So we're now on a couple more platforms. But if you can, hop over to YouTube and subscribe to the channel. It's free, and it helps us out tremendously with us trying to grow as fast as possible over the next 8 months, because the more people that are aware, the better off we're going to be as a country. And the more unified we are as a majority, the better off we'll be as a country. So everybody enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good night. And as always, we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
They voted early. They voted absentee. They voted in person. They voted by mail. They voted by drop box. And then they got their families and friends to go out and vote. Election officials, the entire electoral system, withstood unrelenting political attacks, physical threats, intimidation, and pressure. They did so with unyielding courage and faith in our democracy. With recount after recount after recount, court case after court case, the 2020 election was the most scrutinized election ever in American history. Challenge after challenge brought to local, state, and election officials, state legislatures, state and federal courts, even to the United States Supreme Court not once, but twice. More than 80 judges, including those appointed by my predecessor, heard the arguments. In every case, neither cause nor evidence was found to undermine the national achievement of administering the historic election.